Chapter 18, The Battle. Ragweed's earring saved her, so powerful, so swift with Mr. Okax's descent, that he pushed a wave of air before him and caused the earring to flutter. The flutter felt like the tap of a tiny finger on Poppy's ear. She felt it and whirled. And at last possible second, she saw the owl coming and made a leap to safety. The next moment, however, she realized she had made a terrible mistake. She had leaped not back among the corn, but farther out into the open road. Mr. Okax was now on the ground, blocking her way to the field. She spun toward the forest. In a second, the owl was up in the air and down on the other side. Once again, he had blocked her way. "Not so smart at all, are you?" he answered. "Well, I don't compromise with what I want," he told her. "And what I want is you never getting home alive." He made a sudden darting movement to the left. Poppy jumped to the right, but Mr. Okax was just ahead of her, just as quickly as he shifted back towards her, so that Poppy was forced to halt herself clumsily. That means she had to stop suddenly. Then she stood flat-footed, panting, not sure which way to go. The owl towering over her laughed. "I told you that's what would happen if I caught you again, didn't I? But this time you won't have that fat porcupine to help you." So saying that, he made a snap at her with his beak. Mr. Okax's mention of Aerith was a reminder Poppy needed. She reached down and yanked the quill from her sash and then held it before her like a sword. At first, Mr. Okax blinked. Then he snickered. "You don't think one of his quills is going to stop me, do you?" "The owl on the barn," Poppy panted between hard breathing, "is just a fake. You've been frightened by a fake owl." Mr. Okax's beak dropped open. He hesitated. In that moment, Poppy sensed she could have gotten away. But she could not resist another taunt. "You're not an owl. You're a chicken," she cried out in triumph. For an instant, the two of them, owl and mouse, confronted each other. Then a look of terrible rage passed across the owl's face. Poppy knew then that she'd made another blunder. She'd lost her momentary chance of escape. Now there was nothing he was not going to do to kill her. Oh my goodness, boys and girls, this is so intense. She would have to fight him. Trembling, she flourished the quill. In response, Mr. Okax spread his wings, then beat down hard with them upon the road. They threw up a cloud of dust. It was hard for Poppy to breathe, much less see. She took a step back only to hear a sound behind her. Confused, she turned. Hidden by the dust, Mr. Okax had overleaped the road. Once again, he was behind her. From there, he made a slash at her with his beak. Poppy stuck out with her quill. Seeing the quill and realizing the danger to his eyes, the owl pulled back. He glared at Poppy. He snapped his beak. Poppy stared back, grim-faced, gasping for breath, waving the quill before her. "If it takes the whole night, I'll wear you down," Mr. Okax hissed. "All it takes is one mistake on your part. Then you're done, finished." He made a forward feint, and Poppy danced nimbly back. Mr. Okax struck again. This time it was not with his beak, but with his talons. Poppy, quill up, dodged the talons with a quick sidestep, but she knew her only hope was to get into the corn and hide. Otherwise, the owl could overpower her. Making sure of her footing, she began back toward the forest. Just as she had hoped, Mr. Okax leaped up and landed between her and the trees. Here's a picture of what's going on in the story. All right. It was just then that she raced for the corn. Mr. Okax was just as fast. Grasping her strategy, he barely touched earth when he took a flying hop toward to block her way. He advanced wildly now, snapping and snarling, and in response, Poppy slashed wildly with her quill. Once she struck out at the owl's face, but it only hit his feathers. But though the blow glanced off harmlessly, it seemed to make him so angry. Mr. Okax, closing in, darted his head in and out, side to side. Poppy was bewildered and confused. Then the owl turned briefly away from her. In a flash, she made a successful rolling dive under his wing. She was behind Mr. Okax at last, on the corn side of the road. She started to run. He turned his head in a complete half circle, like owls can do, saw her and spun his whole body about, his right wing extended all the way at full length. The wingtip struck Pappy a glancing blow to the head. Down she tumbled, ouch, and landed on her back in the dust. Seizing his advantage, Mr. Okax pounced, beak open, tongue out, hissing. Pappy whipped the air with the quill. The tip of it pricked the owl's tongue, and he screamed in anger and reeled back. Pappy had just enough time to get back on her feet. Once more she faced him, quill at the ready like a sword. Mr. Okax stung, pressed forward, now this way, now that, head bobbing, weaving viciously, snapping with his beak. Increasingly exhausted, Pappy was forced to give ground. She crumbled to her knees. It was the moment that the owl had been waiting for. With a powerful kick, he thrust his left claw, talons spread wide, at Pappy's head. Oh no, boys and girls, what's going to happen to Pappy? Pappy saw the claw coming. Using all of her strength with the grip of the quill, she held it up with both paws to protect herself and jabbed it into Mr. Okax's claw as it came down. The owl gave a squawk and fell back and began to roll about violently. Fearful of losing the quill, her only weapon, Pappy pulled on it with all her might. But the barbs had caught. She could not get the quill loose. She was being dragged and bumped along. Mr. Okax, screeching and flapping his wings wildly, flailed into the air. Before Pappy even knew what was happening, she too was in the air. She did tell herself to let go of the quill, but by the time the thought was whole, it was too late. To drop from that height Mr. Okax had already reached meant a fall to a certain death. There was nothing to do but to hang on. Mr. Okax, squawking, hissing, flew like one possessed. Up and down and all around he went, making loops and stalling dives, climbing and twisting, anything and everything to work the quill from his claw. But the more he flexed and twisted, the more the barbs worked themselves into his claw, causing ever more pain. Pappy hung on. That's all she could do, boys and girls, is just hang on for dear life. The feet that Mr. Okax was dragging a claw, and from that claw dangled a mouse. I think I skipped a page. Hang on just a second. Pause for the cause.